Baseball is crushed.
You're listening to the New York Yankees Recaps podcast, where we're talking New York Yankees baseball all season long. Recaps of big games, the best home run calls, trades, rumors, and what's happening down on the farm. Every game, all season long.
I know that for a lot of people, myself included, sports and baseball, they're a way to disconnect from the reality that we face every single day. The stressors at work, any family issues, medical problems, financial issues, anything that stresses you out. It all goes away at 7:07 Eastern Time when that first pitch is delivered by whoever's wearing the pinstripes. But during a time like this, which in many ways is unprecedented, uncharted waters, it can be very difficult to let go of the stress and the things that are bothering us. I know that a lot of my listeners are in New York, which is being especially hit hard by this coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. So before I get back to sports talk, I wanted to take a second to send my thoughts and my best wishes to everybody out there who is affected by this thing, people who may be in isolation. I know that people are feeling lonely if you don't maybe have a lot of family or friends and you're stuck at home. I know that people can get depressed without social interaction. I know that people who are maybe, living off of canned food or, maybe can't get the things they usually eat. Their diets might be thrown off. They might be going through their own health issues, or, their body might just not be feeling great because they've had to change the way they live, the way they eat. So to everybody out there who's been affected, even if it's in a very small way, I wanted to send my thoughts and say that we'll all get through this, and that in the end, hopefully, we will have learned something and we will have grown as a community. And I wanted to thank you for taking the time to tune in, even though this is a very stressful time. Now, I am committed throughout this pandemic, as long as I'm healthy, to putting out content that can maybe take a little bit of the stress of the news away. I know that during the time when there is no sports, there's not much TV on, people tend to turn to the news, and right now the news is very scary. We're seeing a lot of big numbers on the screen for people who are infected, people who are losing their lives. So it's important to remember that all things pass and that this will pass too. So hang in there, stay tough, and I'll be here supplying some baseball talk along the way to get you through it. So feel free to send this to anybody who you think could use a little pick-me-up, a little distraction, and let's talk about some Yankees baseball. So the baseball season has been delayed indefinitely, but I do not believe they are going to cancel the entire season altogether. I think that eventually this thing will get under control. People are isolating and they're working to flatten the curve. That's a term you've heard many times. Now, it's weird how many different phrases that I had never heard of and that most people had never heard of we're learning. They're becoming part of our vernacular during this. Flattening the curve. Epidemiologist. All these are words that I had never really heard of, or if I had heard them in passing, I didn't, register them into my long-term memory. But I think we will have a season. It might be 80 games. It might be 60 games. I've played baseball seasons that were 20 games, and they were still fun. I can see some scenarios where they have baseball for a month or so without fans, just to get games in. But this season's going to be different. A lot of you know I was putting together a documentary. It's called The Chase for 28. That title is probably going to have to change now, even if they win. The season has been disrupted enough that it's no longer about the chase for 28. It's no longer about the Yankees trying to get a World Series. It's about everything else that's going on and how everything will be impacted by this. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully we will have a season. I think we will. But the last time that Major League Baseball did not have a World Series was 1994. That was 26 years ago. And the Yankees had a very good season that year. They were coming out of the 80s and didn't win any World Series during the 80s, didn't make any playoff appearances between 1981 and 1989. They made the World Series in 1981, a strike-shortened season, and then missed the playoffs every season from 82 to 93. In 1994, the Yankees were 70-43 and in first place in the American League East under general manager Gene Michael and manager Buck Showalter. Between the Yankees and the Expos, who also had 70-plus wins, those were the two best teams in baseball, and that would have been a great World Series. They had guys like Pedro Martinez and Larry Walker. There's a great MLB Network documentary about them. I think it's called The Colorful Montreal Expos. But that season ended on August 12th due to a labor stoppage. Now, these days, that type of thing seems trivial. It was a bunch of millionaires and billionaires arguing how they were going to spend the fans' money. And it ticked off a lot of fans, and that's why after the strike, you saw attendance go way down. The season didn't begin until April 25th of 1995, and fans were reluctant to come back, and attendance was down 20-30%, 40 and 50% in some markets. And the Yankees got robbed. Don Mattingly, who was the captain of the New York Yankees, was trying to make his first ever postseason appearance in 1994. Now, he ultimately did get there in 1995, and he was my favorite player. I'll be doing a documentary on him at some point in the near future. But he got robbed because the Yankees were going to make the postseason that year. They were going to win the East. And a lot of people forget how good that team was and how unconventionally they won. So let's talk about their team. Let's go through the lineup. At catcher, Mike Stanley. He was a tall right-handed catcher. He was popular. He hit for a lot of power. That season, he batted .300 with 17 home runs and 57 RBIs. He had a .929 OPS and a .141 OPS plus. At first base, the captain, Don Mattingly, in his age 33 season, it ended up being his second to last season. Played in 97 games, batted .304 with a .397 on-base percentage, just 6 home runs and 51 RBIs, and .808 OPS, .113 OPS plus. At second base, Pat Kelly. Pat Kelly was 26 years old. He was kind of a pesky hitter. He batted .280 with just 3 home runs and 41 RBIs, .729 OPS, 91 OPS plus. He was a good defender, though. He was versatile. Shortstop was Mike Gallegos, so this was the year before Derek Jeter arrived on the scene. Now, Derek Jeter was not the primary shortstop in 1995. That would have been Jose Fernandez. But Gallego was the man back in 1994. He batted just .239 with 6 home runs and 41 RBIs. You might be saying, not a lot of big home run numbers. You're right. The Yankees hit just 139 home runs in 113 games that season. And by the way, I'm reading these stats off of baseballreference.com, so if you want to follow along, just hop onto Baseball Reference and type in 1994 New York Yankees, or just go to Google and type in 1994 New York Yankees, and it'll be the first thing that pops up. At third base, in his age 36 season, Wade Boggs. I loved Wade Boggs. .342 batting average in 1994. .433 on base percentage, .922 OPS. He did have 11 home runs and 55 RBIs. He was really using the porch that year. My favorite story about Wade Boggs is how much he used to drink. For a finely tuned professional athlete, this is amazing. And Wade Boggs confirmed it's true to TMZ. Wade Boggs once drank 107 beers on a road trip in a single day. A single day! Boggs was also very superstitious. He used to have lemon chicken before every single game. Also, his hair fell out, and he got one of those weird hair treatments and did nothing but hair commercials for many years. And now he's got this weird-looking rug on his head. It's just, for a Hall of Famer, he's just kind of a weird guy. But he was a great hitter. In left field, Luis Polonia. He played 95 games, batted .311 with a .797 OPS, just 1 home run and 36 RBIs, 21 doubles and 6 triples. He was a speed demon, and he did have 20 stolen bases, but he was caught 12 times, so not a great percentage for Luis Polonia. I remember Polonia was part of that Braves team in '96 that the Yankees beat, and I think he was the one that hit a shot into the gap that Paul O'Neill ran down to end. I think it was Game 4 or Game 5. I'm pretty sure it was Game 5. Paul O'Neill on a bad hamstring. Man, he was a warrior. And he chased it down and made a great catch to end the game and send the Yankees back to New York up 3-2. At least that's how my memory is. I'm not going to bother to look it up. In center field, Bernie Williams played in 108 games that year in his age 25 season. Batted .289 with 12 home runs and 57 RBIs and .837 OPS. Did have 16 stolen bases. Was not a great base stealer, though. Caught 9 times. In right field, Paul O'Neill, arguably his best season. He won the batting title. .359, .460 on base percentage, 1.064 OPS. That's a .177 OPS plus, 21 home runs, 83 RBIs. And then at DH, Danny Tartabull, who batted .256 with 19 home runs and 67 RBIs. Tartabull was one of those guys who had good power, but all of his home runs came when the Yankees were up 6-7 runs. He was kind of a stat compiler. And eventually he was traded for Ruben Sierra in the 1995 season. The Yankees did have some great utility guys that year. Randy Velarde, age 31 season. He would join the Angels just the following season, I think, maybe 2 years later. Batted .279 with 9 home runs and 34 RBIs, a .103 OPS plus. Jim Leyritz, he was a catcher, but he also played a bit of first base. He played left field. You might remember he made an error in left field in the Andy Hawkins no-hitter that the Yankees lost. He batted .265 with 17 home runs and 58 RBIs, 883 OPS. I always liked Leyritz. He had a very weird batting stance. He had that very stiff front leg and then a big front leg kick. He was a great fastball hitter. You might remember in '96 in the World Series, he was fouling off Mark Wohler's fastballs, and they were 99, 100 miles an hour. He fouled off, must have been 5 or 6 of them before Wohlers hung a slider, and Leyritz belted it over the left field wall in Game 4 of the World Series. That was a game that Kenny Rogers, not the late singer, but the terrible left-handed pitcher, started for the Yankees, and the Yankees were down 6-0, and they came back and won the game. And again, Wade Boggs drew a key walk late in the game with the bases loaded off of Steve Avery to put the Yankees ahead. But go on to YouTube and type in 1996 World Series Game 4, Leyritz full at-bat, 3-run home run. You'll find it. It's a great at-bat, one of the best at-bats I've ever seen in my 30-plus years of being a Yankee fan. Another backup catcher, I think this was his last run with the Yankees, Matt Noakes. He was 30 years old. He had a very significant crouch at the plate, and he would just take this gargantuan uppercut to try and hit the ball in the upper deck every time, and sometimes he did. He batted .291 with 7 home runs and 19 RBIs in 85 plate appearances, 924 OPS. He wasn't bad. I remember he got drilled by a Roger Clemens fastball, and the ball kind of stuck in between his arm and his rib cage, and so he fired it back at Roger Clemens. That was back when Clemens was with Boston. Speaking of Boston, outfielder Darryl Boston, 31 years old, batted .182 with 4 home runs and 14 RBIs. I honestly don't remember much. I do remember I had his baseball card. I used to get these packs of baseball cards once a week. My dad would bring them home from work, and I do remember I had Darryl Boston. I remember the card. Also, Dave Silvestri, 111 batting average, only had 23 plate appearances. Kevin Elster, 22 plate appearances. Russ Davis, he was part of the trade for Tino Martinez. He and Sterling Hitchcock went to the Mariners after the '95 season. Russ Davis never really became the player that everybody thought he was going to be. He was a big-time prospect. Yankees have had a lot of big-time third base prospects that didn't pan out. You guys remember Drew Henson ended up going to the NFL? Also, Bob Melvin and Robert Einhorn. rounded out the roster. The Yankees had 19 position players that year. On the pitching staff, Jimmy Key was tremendous. If you're too young to remember Jimmy Key, he was a pinpoint lefty. He threw with extreme control, and he made 25 starts that year, 168 innings pitched, 3.27 ERA, 17 wins, 4 losses, just 97 strikeouts, and 52 walks. So more walks than I thought, but that was pretty good for back then. Jim Abbott, he of one hand in his age 26 season, was 9-8 with a 4.55 ERA. Melito Perez, he just kind of disappeared. I think he had some drug problems. He was 9-4 with a 4.10 ERA in 22 starts. Terry Mulholland. Now, as a fan of any team in any sport, there are always players on that team that you just dislike. There are a few of them that I've disliked over the years as Yankees, and Terry Mulholland was one of them. He was just trash. I remember he came in to pitch, and the Yankees would almost always lose. He was 6-7 with a 6.49 ERA. He appeared in 24 games, 19 of which were starts, 120 innings, 24 home runs allowed. And that was before the steroid era. And then Scott Kamenicki. In his age 30 season, he was 8-6 with a 3.76 ERA. Their closer that year was Steve Howe, who got suspended from baseball several times for cocaine problems. He ultimately died in a car wreck a few years later. Bob Wickman, who was missing part of a finger on his right hand. He had a long career. 5-4 with a 3.09 ERA. Xavier Hernandez, I honestly don't remember him. 4-4 with a 5.85 ERA in 40 innings. Don Paul, again, don't remember him much either. 26 games, 3.60 ERA. And then Paul Gibson, 1-1 with a 4.97 ERA. Also appearing that season was Sterling Hitchcock. I mentioned him earlier. He was a big-time Yankees prospect. Think of him as kind of a Jordan Montgomery type of prospect. Pretty good, but not like an overwhelming prospect. 4-1 with a 4.20 ERA in 5 games started. He made 23 appearances, so he appeared a lot out of the bullpen. And then they had several guys, most of whom I don't remember. Joe Osanio, Jeff Reardon, Greg Harris, Mark Hutton, Bob Ojeda. I think Bob Ojeda is dead. And Rob Murphy. Let's look at Bob Ojeda. No, Bob Ojeda is alive. I must be thinking of one of those guys that was in the Indians boating accident in the 90s. There was 2 guys that were teammates, relief pitchers, and they were both killed when their boat crashed into a dock. Very reminiscent of what happened to Jose Fernandez a couple years ago. So again, that was your 1994 New York Yankees. I remember my family took us to go see a game right before the players went on strike. It must have been August 10th or 11th. They went on strike on August 12th. And none of the players coming into the stadium would sign autographs. They were all in a bad mood. You could tell that none of them wanted to go on strike, but everybody was just kind of in a malaise, And looking back on it, I don't think Major League Baseball ever wants there to be another season without a World Series, even if it was due to something like the coronavirus, but definitely not due to a work stoppage, because that cost the owners and the players both a lot of money. It'll be weird to see how Major League Baseball adjusts if the season is canceled this year. Will players who were going to be a free agent after the season become free agents? Mookie Betts was traded to the Dodgers before the season. Would he become a free agent without ever having played a game? That would be interesting. The Dodgers would be screwed there. How will they handle things like service time? Will guys like, just for instance, Garrett Cole signed a 9-year, $36 million contract. I have no idea if he's getting paid right now. I'd imagine he is, but, does it become an 8-year contract, or do they just push everything out by a year? I really don't know. I would assume that just a year goes away. Like nothing happened, like everything was played, and that anybody who was going to be a free agent becomes a free agent. But again, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Nobody wants to see that. But obviously there are much more important things in life to deal with right now than baseball. So again, if you're hunkered up and bunkered down, whatever it is, If you're staying inside to avoid this disease, you're doing the right thing. And I want to urge you all to stay safe. Feel free to write comments on topics you want me to talk about, and I will be sure to keep releasing these podcasts, at least the audio podcasts. I don't know how many videos I'll do, but I'll keep doing these audio podcasts going forward until this whole thing is over, and even afterwards, because we'll be talking baseball, hopefully. So keep your head up, and I'll see you next time.